before I die, I'm trying to fuck you, baby. Hopefully we don't have no babies. I don't even wanna go back home. Hopefully I don't see you on your own.
Yo, bro. Remember how I said, why you acting like that before listening to your phone? All that shit every time I be home. All that shit just
Yo, what's good? I know you haven't seen me in a minute. I'm sorry. But I probably say this every single time I put up a video. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Because this time, I may have been gone for a long time, but I came back with something worth the wait. And that something is my book. My book is finally out. This is the book that I've been working on for, I want to say 5 years now. Because I initially started writing it in college. My second year of college, which would be 2015, and we're now in 2020. Happy New Year. I know I haven't posted a video since last decade, I'm sorry. But we here in the new decade with new possibilities. This video is just gonna be about this possibility right here. I've been looking forward to putting out this book for a very long time. And the first few years that I actually put it together, I didn't even think it was gonna come out. I honestly never thought that I'd have it in my hand. And I've had these copies for a while now. The book itself was probably published in November 27th was when I made the order for all of my books. So it's pretty much been published since late November, early December, you know? And I've held it many times, I've signed a bunch of copies, but something about this one right here, right now in this moment is... Let me just stop flipping it around. That probably looks and sounds mad crazy. But I'm excited to finally sit down and talk about it, because I've given people, the quick rundown of what this book is about and what it means to me and all that, but I never really got to go in depth because I don't want to say it to one person and have to do the entire spiel again to someone else, and there's just too many differences that happen, and I leave important details out. So I just wanted to sit down and actually tell you guys about the illusion of happiness and what it actually signifies in my life to have this book with me. We'll just jump straight into the actual cover art designed by me, of course. Well, actually, most of this art that you see is not mine, because as you can see, my room is kind of different. Even though you only see this wall that you have seen in all of my videos is completely fucking different. Because it was blue, and now it's this dark, beautiful shade of purple. And I moved a bunch of my art around. So you see this one is mine. This one, this one, this one, and this one. The rest are not, including this sticker right here and this beautiful Carrie painting. This is probably my favorite painting in here that I didn't do myself, of course, because it freaks everybody out, but I love it to death. Even when I'm laying down, at night, everything lights off and I see it staring back at me, it gives me peace at night, But back to something that also gives me peace. The illusion of happiness. Now the title goes with the cover art because they both signify wearing a mask. If we're gonna talk about it in the literal sense, it's it's about wearing a mask, and how I felt I had to wear a mask during the time that I was in college to kind of put on a brave face to keep pushing, even though in my soul I knew I had no direction while I was there. There's nothing empowering me to leave, because if I left, then I would have nothing. College was the only thing that made me seem like I was actually going in the right direction, And of course, I went there for parental reasons. My mom picked out the college for me and everything, thanks to her, because literally the only thing I told her about was just make sure they have a basketball team, which I did not end up even trying out for because of a bunch of things. And anxiety just plays tricks on you. Anxiety stops you from doing a lot of things, and this was way before I even knew what anxiety was. Yeah, that's a story for another time, even though it's a short story. Whatever. That's one of the few things that's not in the book. But the title, The Illusion of Happiness, just signifies the fact that my smile wasn't real and that my happiness was an illusion. It was a front. It was a mask that I used to just seem normal around the people that love me. This is the back cover, by the way. Beautiful picture of me. I'll put the actual picture up in the screen right here, I think. I can edit. It's been mad long, but I know how to edit. I'll do it. You know, right here. See that? It's a nice photo, right? Beautiful. But on the back, I put a poem from the first chapter, Soft Spoken Revolutionary. And it's not my favorite poem in the book. That's not why I put it back there. I just thought it spoke to the way that I use my voice. And I felt it was very important to put on the back, to not summarize the book, but summarize kind of who I am as a poet and as I am as an author. But above that, we have a little description of the book next to the beautiful photo. So I'm just gonna read the description for you guys.
This is a collection of poems written by Keelan Peterkin, also known as the Afro Artisan.
That's me.
This book covers topics from his ongoing battle with depression to lessons he has learned through past love. It is a book that explores the mind of a vulnerable boy in his search for true happiness.
Just a quick description, because there's actually like a whole page of backstory here, which I'm not gonna read from you guys because I think it sets the tone for the book too well to say on video, where you guys aren't gonna actually be able to, you know, read what comes after it, you know. To all the people who will buy the book, I'll save that page for you. Right after that backstory is we jump straight into the book. Chapter 1 is happiness. All of these poems are pretty much written in chronological order, so they start from the day that I found my love for poetry, which was in my music class, and I was never ever good in that class. Like, it wasn't even the music aspect, it's just the fact that I'm not the best with focusing, and as soon as you zone out in that class and then come back, everything is just different. Like, it's not a class where if you get lost you can catch up, or if you get lost you ask somebody, yo, what's going on? He's like, oh, we're on this page of textbook and we're back, whatever. It wasn't like that. It was like, if you zone out for a second, you come back, everybody's playing different notes, and like, yo, you ask them, yo, bro, what are we doing? And it's like, he can't even tell you because we're supposed to be doing different things or something like that. That environment was just too much for me because I zone out a lot less now. But when you're trying to sit still through a class that you have no interest in, it's like, it's hard not to zone out for even a second. But these poems are written mostly in chronological order. I had to move a couple things around because certain poems fit into different chapters. So for the most part, they're in the book as they were written. Chapter 1 starts from that day in my music class where I felt like I was on the verge of like exploding, like literally exploding. I don't know what the feeling was. That was probably like the first time I noticed my anxiety, because it's always been there, but there's a certain level where you think, okay, this is normal, and then where you actually feel it build up to a point where it forces some kind of action out of you. And luckily for me, that action was for me to just get up, leave, go to the bookstore, because in my college there was a bookstore like in the basement connected to the building. I copied the composition notebook, came back up, and just started writing. And the first poem I ever wrote is actually not the first poem in the book. It is actually in chapter 2, The Realization, which we'll come back to later. The first poem in chapter 2 is the first poem I ever wrote, called Apples and Oranges, which talks about how we're all different, but we're all similar. Like, we have a lot of similarities, but we're all still unique in our own ways. The purpose of chapter 1 is to capture my mind state from the beginning of my writing, where, you know, I'm writing from a place of inspiration. Whatever inspires me, you know, I see a beautiful woman, I write about that. I get inspired by music, I write about that. Black women, there's a lot in here about beauty, whatever came to mind at the time. And it was me writing from a place of excitement to just get out into the world of poetry, you know, just writing about anything and everything. And just the joy that I got out of writing was beautiful. I had to make sure that these poems actually went somewhere. Like right away, I knew that I had to write a book. It took me a while to realize that my focus was on writing the book and not actually sharing it and publishing it, because in the back of my head, I was like, okay, I'm gonna write the book, publish the book, blah, blah, blah. But in between writing the book and publishing the book, there was a fear of letting other people read my work that completely stopped everything else. Even though I thought that, I wanted people to read my work. There was like, anybody was like, yo, what are you writing? Don't worry about it. All to this day, there are literally hundreds of poems that no one has ever read. And they're just absolutely gorgeous. I've held on to this whole book for 5 years, and up until I published it, there was literally one person who read it, and that was maybe a month before I published it. And then there's me. The only 2 people who read it the whole 5 years before I published it. But that's chapter 1. Chapter 1 was happiness, talked about my joy for writing, and just from writing from a place of excitement. Chapter 2 is titled The Realization, because this was around the time that I realized that something wasn't right. I realized that my happiness wasn't real, it was an illusion. So all the poems that I wrote from this point was still from a place of like excitement, but it started to go down and kind of meet chapter 3, which we'll get into later. And it was like this middle point where I was no longer writing from a place of randomness. It seemed like I was pulling from a certain spot in my mind that I didn't acknowledge at the time. It was like I was pulling inspiration from an ocean that was behind a dam, and like there's a little hole in the dam, and there's just some water coming out. And I basically was just drinking from that water, not knowing that there was this much behind it, just waiting to be free. So while drinking from that one leak in the dam, I wrote this whole chapter, The Realization, where my poetry has a slight shift from writing about anything and everything that inspires me to beginning to become more vulnerable and putting myself into the work a lot more, and becoming more comfortable talking about what I'm actually thinking rather than the beautiful things that just happened to pass by in my life. I started moving from that to the more real topics. And from chapter 2 is where I actually start like really pulling from like a past relationship. I was gonna say past relationships, but I've only been in one relationship. So I pulled from that relationship and like the failed ones along the way. Because inspiration comes from everywhere. Every failed relationship is a lesson to me. So chapter 2 was really the bridge between writing from excitement as a new poet to chapter 3, which is depression. Chapter 3 is definitely the most vulnerable I've ever been to anyone, actually. Because my poetry comes from such a real place of raw emotion. It's like when I write to put things down, to put my feelings into perspective. I'm not writing for it to sound nice. I'm not writing for other people to read it and relate. I create for myself in any form. Anything I do for myself, because that's when it's most genuine. And when it's most genuine, people are going to relate to it on its own. So in chapter 2, I find the dark spots in my mind that kind of ad-lib a few words here and there into my work. And then in chapter 3, that's when I really like fully embrace it and accept that it's real, that these are actually like, these are real thoughts, real feelings. Like around the time that I was writing this, I physically couldn't go to class anymore. I remember I walked up to my history class and I peek in and I see what looks like a quiz, and then my heart just like sinks so far into my chest that it's pumping through my back, and it's just I had to keep going. There was nothing in that moment that could have made me go into that classroom. But chapter 3 is definitely the most vulnerable I've ever been. I would love to read some of these for you, but I want to save it for people who buy the book. I'll read one. I'll read poem number 86, Shower Thoughts. Which one is this? Shower Thoughts 5. And I didn't pick this one for a specific reason. It's not like my favorite poem in the book or my favorite poem in the chapter. I'll tell you my favorite poem for each chapter, actually. But Shower Thoughts 5 goes like this. The way my heart screams for love at night makes up for its silence I've enjoyed all day. It yearns for the blood of another as if it was a vampire I've starved for what feels like an eternity. For the longest time, this chapter was probably one of the biggest hurdles in publishing my book, because in order to publish it, I had to edit it, and in order to edit it, I had to read it. So when every single time I went to edit this book, starting from chapter 1 all the way to the end of chapter 3, it just got harder and harder to read, because the book itself is meant to map out the way my mindset changed as I wrote. So reading it and then watching the way that my poetry goes from, oh my gosh, I'm a poet now, this is so beautiful, I can write about this, I can write about that, I can write about that, and then going from that to only being able to write in this direction about this thing, because this is what's really on my mind and this is what's been weighing on me this entire time, and there's nowhere else I can talk about this except for my poetry. So reading along and watching my poetry go from like this all the way down here is like, it was scary to me. And the scariest thing about it was the fact that I held on to this book for 5 years, and every single time I edited it within those 5 years, I always related to everything in the book, especially chapter 3. And that freaked me out, because it's been years from now. It's been years. The last time I edited this book was in November, and there were still so many poems that related to my exact mood and exactly what I was talking or thinking about, maybe the day prior, the same day, the same week. And it freaked me out, because it's like I made so much progress building who I am today, that to think that I'm still in the same place I was back then during what I think is the worst time in my life, it freaked me out, to say the least. And that became a very difficult part of the editing process. But my favorite poem in chapter 3 is definitely poem number 97, page 71, Warzone. To me, it's the most important poem in the book, and you know, I'm just saying to me because I like this. I like my poetry to be up to interpretation. So there's probably a bunch of other poems that appeal to you and who you are in the moment. But poem number 97 is a poem that I almost left out of the book multiple times, just because of the fact that I had my book on like 3 different flash drives. I had it on Google Docs. I had it everywhere. So it was left out the book maybe 4 or 5 times. And literally, as I'm finishing the publishing process and I read through the book one last time, I realized that the poem wasn't in there, and I had to throw it in there because it summed up like the core message of the book perfectly. That's my favorite poem in chapter 3. In chapter 2, my favorite poem in chapter 2 is number 41, Godiva. And anybody who has seen me perform live knows this poem, because I've performed this one live many times. Like, this is my favorite poem to perform, and I actually just put this in the book. Like, this is my most recent poem that's in the book. Definitely my favorite poem in chapter 2, and there's actually a video of it on my YouTube. Now, if you ask me what my favorite poem in chapter 1 is, I honestly can't answer that question. The poems in chapter 1 kind of speak to certain things, so it's like each of them has their own gems. So I really can't choose a favorite one. It starts off beautifully with warmth, and for the sake of like choosing a favorite, I'll say warmth is my favorite. It taps into something that I really love, and I'm really obsessed with like warmth and like staying warm, and it's just beautiful to me. Like I love being warm in the soul, in the heart. Just warmth is key to my heart. Other than those 3 chapters, all the way in the back there's an about the author that you can read. There's not much else I want to say about this book, because it's like a beautiful time capsule to me that just captures exactly who I was when I didn't even want anyone to know who I was. You know, it was like my way of hiding in plain sight. So if you want your own copy, go to afroartisan.com. It's right there on my website. Or if you know me, if you see me out, just be like, yo, I want a copy of the book. 9 times out of 10, I always have at least 1 or 2 copies over me, so I can give it to you, sign it right there. Hopefully, I'm trying to have a book signing very soon, so hopefully you'll see me post something about that soon. But I've been recording for 30 minutes. I'm rambling, and there's not much else I could say about the book without actually reading the book, so check it out. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Deuces.